All right.
Oh, you go.
What's that? Okay, cool. Welcome everybody to this week's developer podcast. Today with us we have Chris and Robert. So kicking off with some very exciting news is Chris, I heard you finished your book. So well, tell us about it. Hang on, I got some.
It kind of jittery there.
Yeah, so tell us about the book, Chris.
Yeah, so wrapped it up last night. Just kind of hammered away for a few hours. I think I put it at like 67,000 words, so that should put it like a little over the length of the first book. A lot longer than I actually intended it to be, but when the story kind of rolls out, you just kind of go with it. It's kind of the life of a pantser writer, where you don't know what you're going to do until you start typing. But yeah, it turned out a lot better than I thought it was going to be. Would have been done a lot sooner if it wasn't for some medical issues that slowed me down. But I was glad to get it done when I was done, because I was really ready just to get it done and move on. And now I have to take a bit of a it's like customary, take a bit of a long break, like usually a month before you go into edits. So you got to kind of like I don't know, there's like a term where you disconnect yourself from it, so you can refresh your brain and come into a better perspective when you start doing the edits. And that usually doesn't take that much time. Pretty fast editor. But overall, yeah, the book's done, and we'll have to talk about the cover a little later. Robert, you have to pass me along that Photoshop, and we
Come
have
up with
to
the mock-up, and
figure
then
out.
yeah,
what
because
we
we have
do
a whole
with the
process
art
where we
aspect.
basically will
Yeah.
we'll basically brainstorm some ideas, and then we do a mock-up, give it to a concept artist from the mock-up, and then from there we're able to get it finalized or clean up. And that's how we came about the last couple of novel covers that we did for like the novelization in Pierce's book. And I'm going to be really interested to read this book, because I love Pierce's book based off of the perspective it gave of like how everything wasn't going as nicely and cleanly as you would imagine for CIRK when it came to like the viral outbreak. And that, like, you figure it kind of showed that like they weren't really in control of the situation, and they were pretty much just leaving people to basically just fend for themselves, and just they were barely getting on in terms of the whole situation. So it's going to be interesting to kind of read this aspect of it, which is more of the anarchist, more of like the, I guess you could say it's the opposite of Pierce, the survivalist aspect of it, where it's more of like a rag bag of like military, ex-military, basically. Like it's the opposite of Pierce, where Pierce's police, these were more of like the survivalist people that have kind of come together, the doomsday preppers, the ex-military people, you would say.
Yeah, well, it doesn't focus on like a group per se. This is more straight up Natalie and like her surviving the outbreak, and she does run across a couple of people who she comes across a family that comes from a war-torn country, so they kind of understand when things get bad what to do. And then she eventually comes across another veteran that she kind of forms a bond with, because of like they have shared beliefs, shared understanding of the world. And this is but they like try to like CIRK is like trying, not necessarily from their point of view, but from our
They're just
point
not
of view,
able.
CIRK
They
is
weren't made
definitely
for this,
trying.
basically. They were made for more
And
of like a biological event, like anthrax, or something like that, or terrorism.
Terrorism.
Well, realistically, I don't think any kind of military structure would be sort of prepared for anything like this. So to really go into watching CIRK struggle and also reading the struggles of Natalie and Pierce is quite I don't know, it's quite intriguing if you ask me. It's quite interesting to sort of see how each side sort of goes and deals with the infection and the virus. From Natalie's side,
Yeah.
from Pierce's side, and from our side is being CIRK, and we sort of, it's kind of CIRK's kind of our story, so to speak. It's sort of how we as the player sort of deals with the infection, and I think everything
and
sort of
that's the
tells a
biggest
story
thing
of its
about
own.
playing as like in the pandemic mode, is that it's not canon in terms of like it's however you try to basically best handle the outbreak as it stands, and then from there the game just kind of rolls with the punches to adapt to how you're playing. But like you figure when it comes to like the canon story of like the campaign that we're building up, because the books form the basis or the foundation of like how we're going to handle the campaign, and then story narratives, the story threads, basically. And yeah, so
Games.
it's just one of those things where it's like it's going to be pretty interesting because I haven't read it yet. I've literally been like just nose to the wall, just programming and doing the game design. So I actually have to sit down and read it sometime this weekend, and then it'll be the first time me reading the book because I haven't had a chance. Chris finished the outline for the book probably like a week or so ago, and then I just been basically still caught up after COVID to basically try and get caught up, which we have a lot to show for programming and progress in a bit. But yeah, no, I need to read through it and just kind of see what's going on because I'm really curious now based off of like I really did love the last book. And I think there was someone that was even asking if you were ever going to make like a hard copy for it. But that's something that was going to be like something foreseeably in the future after co-op and everything else, is that we'd look into basically doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But for right now, I mean, you figure it's going to be pretty interesting. Is there anything else you want to throw in there, Chris, before we move on to the next section? Anything you want to like instill upon people for your goal going this time around, or anything that you like? I don't know, like without any spoilers, because that's the only thing is you can only talk about it so much without fucking spoilers.
Yeah.
I think
I mean, not too much, but like I already said in some other podcasts, I really wanted to hammer down more of this, like almost like what would our, because it's something like this happens, we're all going to be like, governments will come and save us. We got to have faith in our people, and even in the, we're kind of going through that right now for real when it comes to certain, the big T going on. But you start to see that sometimes our old belief systems can start to break down, and maybe we have to rely on ourselves more. And that's really what the survivor mentality is. And you see pieces of it sprinkled out through the various chapters, and really by the end, you see Natalie's convictions come full circle, where she's like, no, this is our world, it's going to break out. San Francisco, California, the whole world is going to be doomed, and it's like we got to cut our own little piece of the world now and live and find others who are like us. And that's really where we see Natalie's story within the context of the main game, when her faction will be introduced. So this is everything that leads up to that.
I think something also really really interesting is really that survivor mentality of stick together and bugger anyone else who believes.
Well, it's tribalism.
Getting saved.
Well, I mean, because people turning the tribes or groups, kind of like what the 100 did. Like they cover as a theme in like that TV show on Netflix, The 100, where it's like everyone always falls back on their tribes or their groups. And then from there, everyone else is kind of seen as like an enemy or an adversary, and it did in The Walking Dead. So it's interesting that we need to bring that parallel or that thing that would happen regardless in real life as the society deteriorates, as CIRK loses control, simulating that in the ramifications of the campaign and the pandemic, but at the same time giving more depth or characterization or different sides of the story when it comes to like actually like the books, because the books are like, I always see the books that Chris writes is like the BioShock books or the Halo books or the original games, not the new books. The original games, those are good ones. And basically giving context or giving characterization or making you understand where people are coming from and why they make the choices that they do, when you necessarily can't have a monologue like you would have in a book that you'd have in a game. So it's always fun to basically just kind of have that transformative, like different aspects of media, so you can kind of give more nuance and more perspectives to everything. Yeah.
See, I think like you brought up The Walking Dead. How much of an inspiration has
the game or the books
been on Cepheus?
Quite a bit.
Oh, the whole thing. Like you figure
Cepheus.
The Walking Dead, The Last Ship, The 100, 28 weeks later, 28 days later, like all of them. Like you figure World War Z, especially the whole team watched World War Z before we started development on the game. We made everyone sit down and watch it on their share screen. So it was one of those things where it's like, I still watch Dead City. I just recently watched that, and there were so many cool elements and things in there that I want to bring over, like the infected like the infected climbing the walls and all that. That's really cool. How like in Dead City they fall off the things or whatever, and if they live, they kind of like run after you or whatever. So it's like little cool stuff like that. Just to add a little more ambience and just make the city more alive. Is like I'm always looking at those movies and other games to basically just kind of get inspiration and get ideas. And The Walking Dead is firmly up there. Like I rewatch that probably every couple of years just for fun because I don't know what it is, but I have like a weird like I just love zombies. So it's just this prototype, and it's funny is I got to replay prototype in a couple weeks from start to finish for the Chelsea and pandemic mode because what I wanted to do was before we enter stage 3, leaving the doctrines and the DNA research tree stuff and the new airstrikes and all that we're gonna implement is I needed to go back and play prototype. I'll probably stream it on my Twitch to basically just kind of like remember how did Mercer play, how did his antagonist play, the other girl with the abilities, Blackwatch, and just kind of get some ideas and write down some notes and just have some fun before I start on their AI because I really, 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 really want to take a lot of notes out of the Mercer card when it comes to like how Chelsea operates and her tool set and her versatility in combat because in Legacy she's just kind of there, like she's just a standard infected but reskinned with higher health and she can melee you and she has a higher infection damage health. But this time around going into it, the goal is going to be to basically look at like prototype as and a couple other games to basically like properly just kind of build up lieutenants and build up the infected Chelsea in a way that is more of a threat. And when you run into them, you actually are like, oh shit, maybe I should just run away. But that's going to be interesting because we're getting to a point, we're going to talk about this in a bit, where we're so fucking close to finishing the first stage or the first phase. And then from that point, we can actually move on to the doctrines and the airstrikes and the passives and the vehicles last. Because we're saving the vehicles last because we know that's going to be what kicks our ass the most when it comes to CIRK doctrines implementation. Do we want to segue into the programming side now? And then we can save more book questions for the end?
I think sort of touching base more on what you brought up about prototype is like realistically what we see in that game is quite unique and is quite fascinating realistically because of the way they do their little infection system of it hits these town blocks and it hits this town block and it hits this town block and you can as you do story missions it's sort of the city kind of crumbles into turns to and what I can really see a lot is when it comes to sort of Cepheus' side of things, of doing that, of trying to take back city blocks, really is quite exciting. Like when you really get to the meat and potatoes of everything, it is quite exciting because if you look at it from this, like you said with Natalie and whatnot, from the survivor's point of view, you've got certain death on one side, possible death on the other side. Because like Blackwatch, a lot of us don't really care about
civilians. You guys are horrible. I create monsters playing Cepheus. Everyone just goes on murdering, killing civilians, killing sprees or whatever. And I'm just sitting over here just like, what have I done?
What about when I streamed it on the Discord for you?
What did I have you do? I was having we couldn't remember how something looked, and we opened up the legacy of experimental so we could look at it, and then you ended up playing the game for like 20 to 30 minutes on experimental because you went in there only to basically just look at one thing for me because I was like, hey. I had like a billion things open and I couldn't open the game. So I was like, Derivar, can you check this for me? And he sits in the room sometimes when we play games that I stop working. And he goes to check it. And then like 5 minutes, 10 minutes passes and he starts playing the game. And I'm like, and he's like, I didn't expect to play the game. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess that's a good thing.
It's kind of like, I will say, like sitting and playing Cepheus, it's a bit like a drug, really. It
well, yeah, because it pulls you in with like it's all gas and no brakes. Like once things get going, it's just everything's on fire, everything's going horrible, and you have to like literally like there's no hand holding. So,
and that's the thing. that's realistically what I enjoyed the most about playing that session. I'm actually still got that save going.
I
by
saw
the way.
Winter
I've
started
finished
playing
that
it
one.
too after you played it the other day. Because I think he was in the room. But it's just one of those things where it's like, that's a good thing. That's a credit to what we've built, in that we just need to keep innovating and improving and cleaning it up. Because it's one of those things where, like when you're talking about the kind of go back to it and then jump into the programming aspect, is that there'll be days where I'll just sit there back in the day, and I do it now, especially going into redoing the pandemic mode in phase 3, is basically to go back and watch that YouTube channel of NPC Wars. And I'll just sit there and write notes and just kind of look at it and see like how their city deteriorates, how they do their civilian simulation, how they do their infected simulation, how they do their Blackwatch simulation, which would be CIRK. And just, I like watching it so I can just take notes and see what they do and see things that we could potentially do in the future. I'm sure everyone knows of the NPC Wars prototype YouTube channel where you just like, it's that guy that just records NPCs fighting each other, you know? I really enjoy watching that YouTube channel because it's just fun. And it just gives me ideas, and I just leave it on autoplay sometimes as I'm just working or just thinking about stuff to do in the future. Even if I'm just bored and I'm not working, I'm not playing a game, I might open it just to watch it, just to get some ideas and just, you know, even when I'm not supposed to be working on weekends, because I don't know why. I'm just kind of like obsessive about work sometimes. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, no, I do that definitely. And it's one of those things where that's constantly on my mind in terms of getting it to that point with this rebuild where we can just kind of capitalize on those kind of moments and that kind of like dynamic storytelling per se. Because you put all you put all the variables, you put all the situations that can occur in this playfield, like Natalie, like Pierce, which are in 1.4 around the campaign era. And in the starter aspect, what we have now, it's dynamic civilian groups, it's the infected, it's the CIRK. And then it's the ambient civilians that are walking around the street. And just having those elements and then having the interplay and the systems all like, you know, coalescing, it kind of, you know what I mean? It basically just kind of has that simulation aspect of just everything kind of trying to sell that narrative of like the city's deteriorating, but being able to do it based off of like how the players' choices are being taken, where it's like you choose to save this area, you choose to burn that one. What are you gonna say?
And it's kind of like I was talking to a friend of mine. Now this is like way off of sort of Cepheus. Is I was playing a game Tech Warrior, and that game has massive level-based storytelling. Right, and that's what I love about Cepheus, is you know, we may not have cars on the street crashing into one another.
That's sort of a stress
you
goal
know,
at this
we
point, because
have
me and my artists have talked about it, but it's one of those things where like that's gonna come over time, basically just kind of like as we phase up, because we have to kind of like find it. We're in the box, and we have to like figure out what we can fit in that box and how we can expand the box over a couple of years of development. Figure out we can optimize this part of the engine has gotten better. We can use this free resources. But yeah, absolutely. It's just one of those things where like we're getting there in baby steps and strides. And what we had in Legacy was good, but it needs to be better in terms of basically just kind of keep pushing.
And I think that's a big thing is Cepheus already has a level of storytelling, like visual storytelling of, you know, there's a bus that's crashed into, you know, a couple of parked cars. And it's like, and it's like you kind of can see what what the sudden arrival of this virus has done, and that's what I love the most about
environmental
a lot of
storytelling.
games is the fact that a lot of games.
But the nail into that is that when we like, it's not on our list, but like when we do stage 3 of the pandemic thing, one of the things that we wanted to at least prototype and see if we can figure out doing this co-op push is making it to where get rid of the preset clutter and have like a Diablo or Path of Exile level of like mini moments, like a pool of assets. And the idea is that this is a car crash, this is a car on fire, this is this one. Like basically, you take mini moments and you turn them into prefabs or like setup like moments, whatever, like environmental storytelling moments, and you take them and you spawn them based off of the severity of a zone. So when it's a green zone, then basically there's nothing there. It's clean, it's pristine. There's no car crashes. everything is easy to get through. But then you take it to a yellow zone, some car crashes start showing up and they're static and they stay there. You know, stuff like that, where it's like it shows that the zone is deteriorating instead of it already being there when you got that way. So then that way, it's a feedback loop. It's you playing the game. Because if you keep a lot of cities green and clean and basically like unobstructed from Chelsea and warfare, then it would reflect that and how easy it is to get around the zone. But if you let it fall into like, you know, destruction, ruin, then more car traffic and car crashes and clutter and things in the city, like maybe garbage bags or whatever, like in Division. Division is a good example. Well, you take those like elements that populate a city in Division and you turn those into like prefabs that you spawn dynamically via a generation system, taking into account the level of chaos in a zone, and you bake that in from a dynamic standpoint. And I think that's the direction that we try and prototype and kind of figure out going into phase 3. So then that way you don't know what's going to happen every time. And you could run into a red zone and literally just running into traffic jam. And then you have to plan around that. Okay, we're getting out of the cars. We're going on foot. Okay, we're taking helicopters. Okay, we're going to just use the bulldozer tool and just clear it all the way down as we go. So it's one of those things where those are things that we're looking at as part of this rebuild, because we've done it up to this moment where we just take small little systems and small things that we've done in the past and we improve it and we make it better with the cleanup. Like the ADS being able to rotate, like the newer turrets, like the old turrets being a bit minions for the engineer, like the better CIRK models, the better weapon models. I go on and on and on. So it's one of those things where it's important to us with this rebuild to clean up and redo and just improve things where we can that we feel is not going to stretch the timeline unreasonably. But at the same time, like, you know, like keep it within the ramifications of our timeline, but edit and clean up and manipulate and improve where we can, where it makes sense. But what I want to do is I want to get into the actual meat and potatoes before people start murdering us. And so I'm going to show my screen. And what I have here is basically, we did a couple of things. We did a lot of things this week. And one of the things that we did is we added a new category called walls. Because the old thing, we were just, like, the defense section had so much stuff that we were running out of real estate. And it was one of those things where we just needed to make the decision to like, okay, let's just break the walls up into their own sections. And we made the system so dynamic and so robust, we can add new structures and new variations and categories in like minutes. So it's very intuitive and very clean to do. So we can add and extend more structure types or sub-categorize it in the future. But what I was going to show is that I can build the cannon turret and I can build the VAS now. The two types of turrets that we have. Ignore the hologram material. We have to fix that. It's just a little visual bug that we have to fix when we do a playtest. I guess the artist that was working on it forgot to map the weld animation, so that's kawaii. But the idea is that you figure it does have the refill ammo button. We didn't put in the auto refill. That's coming in when we get the ability system online. There's some functionalities like the engineer being able to like flow a grenade or flashlights that are coming when we're not flashlights, but being able to throw that kind of stuff when the ability system comes online. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to spawn it in an infected. Oh, what is that? Oh, you know what? That console command might have been removed. So what I need to do is I need to switch over to my test map, which still has it. Oh, they're sexy.
I love those.
The artist that did it did a phenomenal job.
I love those.
I guess they unbinded it. Isn't that kawaii? Hold on. Okay, so let me go over here. And we're going to bind up our debug for spawning an infected.
Secrets.
Ah, there it is. Oh, it is binded right here. Oh, it's just for debugging.
Oh.
It was basically just That's weird. Oh, wait. Oh, fuck. It's the Fog of War. God damn it. I am so sorry. That was embarrassing. It was the Fog of War system. So I was just like, wait, why can't I see them? And it's because there's like technically You can't kind of see them. Okay, I was like having a retard moment there. Okay, so we're gonna put that there. We're gonna put that there. We're going to speed up time to make up for the time lost, and then we're going to slow mo. Now, my technical artist Dimitri has been kind of jumping around, helping everyone across all of our tasks this week, which is why you're gonna notice some things are still not textured. But if I press the equal sign, you'll know. Oh wait, I'm stupid. I need power. I forgot. That's the other thing is I got the zone system online. So you're going to notice that there's like a weird little debug icon right here that basically like there's an actual power requirement on turrets. Otherwise, they don't do anything. So let me slow-mo, speed it up. Okay, turrets are online. And now they do their jobs. Let me spawn in a crap ton. Looks like there's some kind of delay going on there when they're shooting. So we'll have to look into that. There it goes. So yeah, there's still probably some little bugs going on here and there we're gonna have to hunt down. And then there's definitely some issues if like when the turrets, like he should be able to fire that close. So we added an aim source. And the idea is that they have a little point right here where they actually do their logic for like determining who they're gonna hit and whatever. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like it's working because they should be shooting right now and he should be shooting. So there's some kind of bug going on there. So we're going to have to look into that. Let me spawn out. And let me see if I can not spawn any as many infected. And then we're going to build them a little bit further back. And then we're going to do slow-mo 10. And I forgot again. Now keep in mind that the power amounts are not final. So what I'm showing for like how much these things require to actually operate are not going to be the final numbers of like when we actually put it in you guys' hands. They're very raw. It's just what I put in there so I can make sure that everything was working. And there's still quite a bit of bug fixing that needs to go on with like the turrets, the target acquisition, their reliability. And like I showed you, when things just get right up on them, I don't care if it's not realistic. Fuck that. They're going to shoot someone that's right in front of them. Because that's just stupid. And every other RTS game has done it since the beginning of time. So it's one of those things where I'm going to have to like get with Derek and we're going to have to basically improve their logic so they're allowed to shoot things that are like right up on them right here. And same thing for this one. Otherwise, your turrets are goddamn useless the moment they actually get a melee range. But yeah, that's the turrets and they're working and they're doing their thing. And we fixed the crash that was happening last week. Let's see. And there's definitely some issues still. Like we need to probably spend a couple of days just improving their combat AI a little bit more, which is going to happen like at the 11th hour before we have a playtest. Is we need to spend foreseeably like a day or two just cleaning up their ability to do target acquisition, improve their ability to choose locations to attack and occupy points on a structure, and just get all of that functional. So then that way, like us playing it and you guys playing it, it's not going to be like that where the infected decided to go to his last position over his current position. But that's just like little small bugs that would take us like a day or two just to hunt down and fix and blah, blah, blah. So it's fairly straightforward there. And I guess I can't select this structure now. So either oh, no, that's weird. Okay, I'll have to look into that. So there's a bug there. You can see that we added the ammo icons in. I briefly covered that last week. So you can actually see that there's ammo, and you can buy a replenishment of ammo. And I don't think that's working. So I'll have to look into that. That's another bug. Okay, so there's that aspect. And hold on. In my map, there is a debug object, and I need to remove that because it's going to influence my testing and what I show you guys. Okay, so we got that working. And one of the other things that we kind of got working, we did get working, was we set up a zone system. And I'm going to show it in the confines of co-op. So everything that you're seeing today is set up so that it works for multiplayer. And we've been, extensively just kind of testing everything and getting everything working. So let me grab this viewport, go half and half, F11. And you'll also notice the Minimap is in there. The Minimap is not updated for every map because an artist has to go in and capture it on a per case basis. But we'll get to that in a second. But if I zoom out, and I zoom out over here, you're going to notice that we have the zone system in. The zone system was what we had in Pandemic that would effectively allow you to civilian evacuation. It was for managing population in the zone. Like, it showed you the name of the zone. You could click on a zone and you could manage it. Basically, it just gave you all that administrational structures, and we built the foundation in pending a improvement or a retrofit when we get to phase 3. We're building it in layers. And the first layer was making sure you can see the zone names and you can see the power within the zone. Because the community voted about a month or two ago that they wanted us to go on the route of grid regional zone power instead of like localized small power grids. And I showed it last week, and I was prototyping the system. So then that way, like, it would know, like, if you had 2 zones overlapping, it would choose the one that you're overlapping the most. So then that way, if we ever had a level designer thing or a modder that basically like made a zoning correctly, because you're never supposed to have overlapping zones like this, is the system would be able to determine, oh, I'm primarily in this zone, so when it gets built, the power is going to go here or there or whatever. So let's see. Oh, you know what? I think that was perfectly even, so that one didn't work. Isn't that cute? Okay, so I found a bug there. Kawaii. But you can see there's an example of the power going to 75. I'm going to have to look into that one. But then if I go over here and I build in zone D, you're going to see that basically it is replicating to the client on the right, so the client can benefit off of any client or whoever building in zones. The power is shared amongst everyone. This isn't done by default, so you have to like program it and replicate everything by itself. So you can see that one added 450 power for CIRK in the zone D. And then the large generator in zone B is going to add 900 power, and you can see it's replicated. So now what I could go and do is I could basically go to the, what did you say?
I love power. I love the the idea of 900 power.
Well, this is actually a relevancy issue. That's cool.
It's just like,
okay, I have to look into that. Is that you figure these need to be marked as always relevant. So what happened is basically it got created only on one client, and then the optimization of the engine decided to not spawn it for some reason. So, but it's there because it's 900. So I'm gonna have to look into that because we got a replication bug there. Because I'm assuming if I build this one, and because both clients are here at the time of creation, yeah, it's there. So yeah, it was the same issue that I showed previously a couple of weeks ago, where the sky crane wouldn't appear, and then it would appear randomly. But in this case, for some reason, it's not even appearing when you move to it. So I'll have to do some. That's a relevancy networking bug. I'm gonna have to research going into next week. But now, if I were to build a barracks, you'll notice that it'll just subtract from the power from everyone. Well, when it comes, because we didn't want to make it exploitable, so we made it to where basically it doesn't actually update the cost until it lands. Is the idea. So when it comes, you can't cancel a sky crane when it's coming. It didn't support it in Legacy, so we didn't add it this time around either. And if I go and I put in, let's say, a ADS over here.
Tell you what, you've done an amazing amount of
Still
work.
a lot more to do. See, I took that power out of there, basically when the barracks came online. And then if I go over here and I click on this ADS, what you can do with how I set it up is that if I set the ADS direction and then I cut the power of the zone, it will immediately, oh, that's weird. It should have stopped. Oh wait, there's still power. Maybe that one's bugging out and allowing it. Huh. Okay, well that's a new bug. I thought I had fixed that, but you weren't supposed to be able to rotate it when power is out. Okay, I'll have to look into that. But the idea is it was supposed to cancel, and then that way it can't move anymore when it remembers its last position. But there must have been a change recently that broke that logic. So I'm going to have to look into that. So yeah, there's that there for basically the zone system. And then I might as well show it anyway. Let's see if it's going to act silly anyway. So I'm going to put some lights up in this zone, and I'm going to give myself some more money. And let's see if it's going to play nicely. Oh, it put me over the power. So now the warning lights are going off. They're on emergency power. So I got a system in that basically, like, when a zone loses power, all the structures will basically pulse red when it's overtaxed, and it'll play an EMS message that's like, oh, power is overtaxed. You have 60 seconds to restore power to the grid before emergency power turns off. And then at that point, it would basically like go dark. So if I stop it that way, okay, so yeah, it is bugging out a little bit there. Is that basically it's supposed to stop the grid completely? It might just be, let me test it in the smaller map. I think it's because this map is so large. Let me go to this one. And I'm curious if it does it here. I'm
That's
just
just jumping off.
curious. Well, yeah, no, but
You're
hold on.
thinking
I
with
think that
eyes.
I tested it here, but I haven't had a chance to test it in the other map. So it might just be something, like a cultivation of things that I didn't account for in that other map. So let me try it here and see if it still does it. And then I'm going to set the time to midnight. Okay, so then it goes to nighttime. And then I'm going to cut the power. Yeah, it works now. So it must be a net relevancy issue. So I'm going to have to go in there and investigate that because it's some kind of optimization the engine's doing by default where some things need to be marked as always relevant. And for whatever reason, that's causing bugs when the maps get so large. Where it's like, again, you test it in small little subsets and small little like manageable things. And then you start to test it with like larger scale and different aspects of how it's going to be used. And that's an example of like, I need to look into that. So then if I build the generator, then the emergency EMS lights go off because in 60 seconds, it was going to cut off all the power and all your structures were going to go off. And then at that point, you were going to have no lights. And then let's see if this works now. I'm just curious. Oh, you know what? That's going to break it. When it sets up, I think it's going to tax the grid. Yeah, it's going to tax the grid. So then we're going to do this. And then we're going to speed up time. And then we're going to kill that one. And then I can't see what I'm doing. So I'm going to set it to noon. And then I'm going to set the ADS direction, cut the power. See, now it works. It was net relevancy. Ain't that but a bitch. So I'm going to have to look into that and figure out why it's doing that. Because when I tested it in the smaller map, it wasn't doing it. But now it's doing it on the larger map, which is, again, it's just some kind of net relevancy issue. So now if I put the power back online, if it's not going to screw me, it's going to remember the original orientation that I had set it to, and it's going to resume moving in that direction. There it goes. Yeah. Yeah, because there was a debug line where it was like, oh, this was the direction that the player originally told me to face in when I lost power. So let me face that direction. And the same thing here is that once the ability system is in the next next week or so, hopefully, then we'll be able to have it to where you can fire and see like the charge level and all that. So that's something else that we're working on going into that. The other thing, which let me see if I can show you guys, would be, I think it's be this one. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so Derek's been working on prototyping the Minimap system and getting it so that it's kind of like Halo Wars, of being able to see like where people are looking and their rotation. Because me and Chris and Duravar have been feeding on Halo Wars the last couple of weeks, and we've been basically just playing a lot of that. Yeah, I love that game too.
Love that
And
game.
one of the things that we noticed is very invaluable in that game is having the ability to see where your allies are looking or where their camera is. So you don't always have to ping in every situation. You can just look at the mini map and just be like, oh, it's what's going on over there? And then they would know to click there, and then they'd be able to like jump there. So you can see when I click, there's like a debug sphere. That's the associating logic that would either A, forward a move order to that location, or it would B, move your camera there based off a type of click. If you right click, it'll move your units there. If you left click, it would jump your camera there. And that was one of the last things that Derek we were stuck for quite a bit of time just making this setup and setting up the actual icons that they were replicated properly. And that kind of kicked our butt in terms of getting all that configured. Getting the landscape tool updated, which I'll show in a second. But you can see that it is replicated. We do have to kind of play around with the update rate and the frame rate, because right now I think that's operating at about like 10 to 15 frames per second for an update rate. We're probably going to have to increase that quite a bit to like 20 to 30 frames per second just to make it more fluid, because I don't like the jumping. And then we got it to where basically you could zoom in, and then you could basically use the middle mouse button to pan. The middle mouse button doesn't zoom here yet, but it does at least allow you to do this. And then you can look around and rotate that, and then you can reset it. And the same thing here, with different players could be looking at different things. And then that way it's all, like that's replicated. And then you can see the units actually show up as dots. So we got that working essentially. Well, we abandoned the icon approach because it was just too convoluted. It was too complicated to basically just have the old icons that we had in Legacy. You couldn't even make out what they were, because once you get to a certain map size, which was pandemic mode, the visibility of the icons just got rammed into the shitter. Like at most, we're just going to do different icon shapes to represent like a structure versus a unit, versus maybe a lieutenant, like different icon shapes. And I think that's the most we're going to do aside from just colors. So like if I load into we'll do, I think he did this one generated. Hopefully he did. Yes, thank God. He did do that one. I was trying to remember off of his notes that he wrote on his channel. But basically, like, this is a good example where, like, if I zoom out, in this little mini map, when the infected spawn, I'm going to be able to see the red icons as they appear. That gate Wisvo got reset. I'll take that down. So no. So they're going to be coming from there. Oh, crap. The navigation must have gotten reset. Yeah. There must have been a navigation setting that was changed for debugging or testing reasons, and it basically broke the navigation in that map, so I had to manually rebuild it. Okay, so we're going to just charge up, so that way we can show the mini map and play. And then I'm going to zoom in here. Wait, are they coming from the same direction still? Oh, there they are. So you can see the reds right there, where they're showing up. We barely got the mini-map working in the last like day or so. So there's definitely some like cleanup optimization that needs to happen in terms of just making sure everything's working and everything's clean and orderly. It looks like they're not reliably spawning on the client one. So we'll have to look to see what's going on there, but they're only spawning on the host reliably. I don't think that was happening before, so that's something we'll have to look into going into Monday. And there's definitely some desync going on in terms of like the locations of units. Yeah, there is. So those are things we're gonna have to look into going into next week, is cleaning that up and improving them, because there's some kind of desynchronization or there's some parity that's missing in terms of like how it's updating. Because like in this client, it's as if all the units are like in the nether realm, but the only thing that actually seems to be synchronized is the camera representation. But then it worked right there, it fixed. So that could be a net relevancy issue. It could be an issue as the maps get larger, the Unreal Engine is trying to optimize it. And as you get closer, then it course corrects. And it's like, oh, these things are relevant to me now. I need to populate them right now. And then it does that. And then it basically course corrects based off of, it's like a non-square number where like everything in a game engine like Unreal, you basically type in like a float of how close units need to be together to have the automatic replication system kick in to bring things into synchronization as an optimization, say for like an MMO or like a first-person shooter like Pug, where you don't need to know what's going on the other side of the map. So it doesn't even send those calls to you. It only sends the calls that are relevant to your unit within like a square mile or whatever kind of deal. Because guns can't even shoot that far in Pug, as an example. So it's something going on that we're going to have to look into, because you guys just saw it yourself, where I think we're going to have to mark certain elements as always relevant, because again, the engine's made for third-person, first-person shooters. So it does take quite a few tweaks out of the box to get it to play nicely with an RTS game. And I don't know what's going on there, so we're going to have to look into that. There might be some bogus navigation going on there. Yeah.
I will say though,
Nothing. What were you saying? I'll have to look
Huh?
into that.
I do like the.
Well, it needs to be skinned still. It's more of a rough, dirty prototype. Like, just keep in mind that like Winter and them came up with a sketch. Let me find it. Sorry, hiccups. It was in Janari's channel. Hold on. Give me just a moment. Trying to pull up. Here it is. So this was like the last. Ignore the Doctrines thing. That was them just playing with ideas. But this is like the last prototype that they were coming up with and playing with. I'm not sold completely on it yet. We needed to kind of regroup on that. Right now, I'm like fully like engaged by like the programming and the game design stuff, where I can't fully wrap my head around UI right now. So we'll have to come back to the UI in a couple of weeks after we've caught up and finished like what I'm showing you right now, so I can just focus on the UI with Derek in one fell swoop and get that finalized. But like, that's a rough idea we're looking at. Or we might play with like having more of like the translucent, like seamless mini map. I don't know. It comes down to style there in terms of what we want to push, but we'll come to a decision after a little more things are like laid out and they are ironed out going into the coming weeks. And then what I wanted to show, hold on, let me find that note. It should be here. No, that was added. Right. So I showed that last week, but I just wanted to show that it was working. Is that if I go to the U, and I'll turn off the multiplayer so I can save performance, is that if I put in these and I put in the spotlights, and then I put in one of these, and then I slow-mo, and then I set it to midnight, you're going to notice that, let's see here, the emissives on these are turning on, and they actually show you now, like they're actually up to date with the brightness. I think that these are acting up, so I'll have to look into those. But if I destroy the light, then the actual emissive now turns off and changes. So we did manage to get that in and get that set up. I'm not really sure what's going on with this light. Something must have been changed from Dimitri's side or something else I'll have to look into. Because this light is supposed to be on when everything else is on, but it's not for some reason. But you can see that we did get that functionality set up. And one of the major goals going into this week as well was setting up the foundation of a post-process setting by time system. And the idea is that way a level designer can take a screenshot of the world, and come up with a color profile or a post-process or an EMB mod, basically, that allows them to customize like the visuals in a map based off of like time of day. The previous system was very, very like rigid and very hard to work with. Like if I bring up the day and night system, we built a very basic blueprint this time around that was light years better than the previous one. But then some of the, like this aspect is going to be deleted and all of this is being offloaded to another system. But the idea is that we have timelines that configure the sun intensity, the day and night, and different aspects of the sun, the moon over time. So we can stipulate how many shadows there are sometimes the day, how glass is handled, how the sun intensity changes overnight, and we can extend that over time. So it's very robust and very dynamic. And that was one thing that we set out to do this week, was to basically make this artist-friendly timeline that was non-replicator. So these are static values that never change across gameplay, and it allows like the lights on the buildings to change so that it looks like someone's inside and home, like in Spider-Man, where at nighttime the lights turn on and off. That's this, you know. Or like setting the skylight or the sunlight or the sun shadows based off of like we want more or less shadows in certain parts of the day, or just setting the tint as a whole. Now this is going to be waysided very soon, and it's going to be replaced entirely by this system where, let's say if I set it to 9 o'clock and I set the saturation, this should work. I think Michael said I do saturation. So let's see if that's going to play nicely. So that if I spawn in, it's like super crazy colors right now. And this is obviously a very extreme example, so I don't have to sit here and like show it like a slow pace of like minor changes. But the idea is in that way, a designer can go in and put in another value and say at 10 o'clock, I want the film grain, or I want to adjust like, let's see, I adjusted global contrast. Let's say I changed the global contrast to like purple. So then now what it will do is it will transition dynamically. If I go to my post-process effect and I go to show modified, and then I go to the contrast value, you can see that it's interpolating in real time between those two values, between the lerps. And this is meant on the basis of having very photorealistic, very like realistic like color palettes and worlds, and having per second the per hour configurables in terms of being able to have it to where like the artist can go in there and spend a day or two and set up the weather system and the time and like how the sun and the moon and everything works to make it to where like you get better screenshots, you get better gameplay visuals. Because I mean the legacy looked good, this will make it look better. Because the old system was very, very hard to add to, and it wasn't very robust. But this system supports every value practically on the post process. It allows you to dynamically change them over time. Think of it as like an EMB mod that you install on Fallout, New Vegas, Skyrim, where it changes how things are rendered or visually shown. And everyone here knows based off of those YouTube videos and seeing modders that the right post process or the right visuals can make or break a game in terms of basically making it look fucking amazing or piss poor, where people just want to mod it out basically of like really over aggressive colors and tones. So that's something that basically I set out to do this week, and to replicate and to get set up. So then that way I hand it off to the designers, and then they can work with those tools now as I'm focusing on the programming and the C++ and the gameplay elements. So there's a little bit of a handoff there basically. And then one of the other things that I basically set out to do was to, hold on. Right. Let me show that. So I'm going to reset these because these look ugly, and it's going to make my eyes bleed. So I'm going to delete those. And then I'm going to spawn back in, and I'm just going to really quickly show something else that we had a poll over. So on Discord, I asked, how did people want power to respond if you lost power suddenly? And it was overwhelmingly in favor of having it to where if you lose power, then you lost power at your fault, and there's going to be a repercussion for it. So one of the things that basically I wanted this time to incorporate is having it to where when a gate opens, if you lose power while that gate is opening or closing, it will pause the state of that object until you regain power. So if your gate was opening or closing and you lose power, they're getting in. So like if I move this away a little bit further, and then I cut power intentionally, right about now, then at that point, infected could come in. So then that way, infected can target your power grids and be able to like, oh, okay, like make an opening that way, where it's like, oh, we need to get the power back online. Our gates are open or stuck in this state, blah, blah, blah. I think that poll on Discord had an approval rating of 78%. Wanted me to basically go in the route of pausing it immediately. And then in 22% was a no, let them finish. So we ended up going the route of implementing that after that poll. And then if I go and I build the power again, then basically it's going to resume its original operation the same way that the ADS operated. Now it's going to do what it needs to do. It's going to open or close based off of whoever's close to it. If I had built further away, it would have closed. Had I built closer, it would have opened. Because again, there's a system for detecting your units and that stuff. Now, one thing that we neglected to mention previously is that we did put the upgrades back in for walls and gates. We neglected to do that because we've been kind of like just running around trying to get as much done as possible. And me and Derek totally overlooked that. Is that you weren't able to actually upgrade a wall to a gate for the last couple of weeks as we were working on this rebuild. So we did go back and we cleaned that up so you could at least do that. And you were able to upgrade it. And you were able to go to like a tier 3 gate right off the rip is the idea. So that's in there now. And we got all that situated. It looks like there's definitely... Is that the power? No, it's not a power issue. So yeah, it looks like the gates aren't opening after I did the upgrade, so I'll have to write that down as a note. Let me finish building that wall. It's gonna bug me. Let me see if it only happens... Oh, that wall... Oh, that's why. Oh, that wall is too short, if I had to assume. I must have cut that wall too short. Yeah. Okay, fine. So yeah, well, again, there's a little bit of bugs and things we're gonna have to work out. Yeah, it's not even opening at all. So the upgrade logic must not be. Oh, you know what it is? It must not be registering with the game state properly. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna have to look into that. Well, I have it on stream now, so we can fix that going into Monday. But yeah, so like you figure, we did get that upgrade system in this week, and I guess there's a bug there, so we're gonna have to look into that. And then look into why this wall wasn't upgradable, because to me that looks like a full wall. So we'll get into that and figure out what's going on there. What were you gonna say, Durvar? Yeah, it's just that it looks so close. That maybe it's just user error. I'll have to look into that.
I think that's also another good thing to sort of touch base on now is what Derek's done when it comes to hooking the landscape in with like the construction
sure.
into the landscape.
I can do that. But one thing I want to show real quickly before we switch over to that map is let me delete these objects because I need to show one thing while we at least have this here. So something else that we set up this week was an accessor or an easy way of being able to disable shops when you lose power. So ignore the sky crane. I mentioned in previous podcasts that everyone doesn't come every single time. If there's no carrier, it just spawns in a debug zone. So right now, if I click on it, I don't have enough power. I have negative 25. Again, these values are very raw, so I'm gonna have to go in. I just typed in very high value, so it's equal to test. So if I build another power generator, which is not going to be this high in the playtest, and I click on it now, you can see these. Now that's something else that myself and or Derek need to go in and fix, is that temporarily we put in like a little workaround where it just gets rid of the icons. But there was like I guess you could say there was a miscommunication there. We're not doing that ever again. I hated that in Legacy, and we're sure as hell not doing that again, where certain icons or buttons would just disappear temporarily when a status wasn't available. And it gave the impression the game was bugging out or breaking. So something we have to do going into this week, and I mentioned this in the daily dev report update on Discord, is make it to where these buttons just are disabled, but you can still click on them and you can still hover over them. Because I purposely hate that in Legacy. That, like, it was just bad. Or just bad design. That basically, like, you would, instead of, like, disabling something, you would remove the button altogether. And it was just cumbersome and weird. So it's one of those things where we're never doing that again. The times that we put in this week to expand the system to basically make it to where like these buttons stay, but you just can't build anyone until power is reconstituted so that you can call in the drop. And you know what? Since we're here, I'm going to show one more thing, Duravar, before we move on. Is that if I set the time of day, let's set it back to noon, I need to bring up a 2-player session. This is one of the things that I was working on last week, and this kicked my ass. Oh boy, did this kick my ass. Because I had to work my head around basically some aspects of replication that can be overwhelming. Because we're all learning as we develop this. So you figure, like, we didn't go to school for this. We're just sitting here, banging your head against the wall, learning it the hard way, researching, failing. You don't count. So
I did.
you figure it's one of those things where essentially everything is experimentation, testing, alliteration. And one of the things that I was working on was the rally point system yesterday, I'm sorry. The rally point seems a little large. I haven't seen this version of it yet. It got put in just right now before the podcast. Probably going to have them shrink it by half. But, you know what? That's my code scaling here. Most likely, hold on. Yeah, that's my code scaling here. So if I go to the rally point mesh, the scale is not exposed. Oh, actually, it is. Yeah, see, what does that look like when it's the normal one? Oh, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, I have to go back and change my hard-coded values. Last night, I was putting in the rally system, and that the base asset was so tiny that I needed a magnifying glass to see it. It was like half the size it is now on the right screen. So I had to scale it up in C++ when it got created as a temporary workaround until I could get my artist to upscale the asset and re-import it into the content browser. So it's one of those things where just ignore the sizing. It is kind of eccentric. So what I did is I set up a rally point system that is replicated per client. So each client can have their own rally points per se. And the idea is in that way, like you click on a barracks and you tell them to go somewhere where they're built, then they're going to go there when they get built. But then the client 1 can do this, and client 2 can do this, and client 3 can do that. So the idea is in that way, it'll remember. Now, we're going to have to test it further for disconnects and reloading a save file. That's one of the things we're pretty sure it's going to break at that point because we have to figure out a way of, per se, saving, like, who is who, effectively. Because you figure, like, we have to figure out some kind of persistent way. Maybe Epic will have, like, an ID system where we can save that into the save file and be able to say, like, hey, if Johnny Rico joins and he has this 16-bit, 32-bit hex code, every time that player comes in, load that, because that's his rally points, So or maybe Steam has a system. I don't know. But that's one of the things where we're going to have to figure out the best way of doing unique character identifiers that is locked to your account or your Steam profile or your Unreal identifier, Epic Game Service identifier presence. So then that way we can use that to bring it back up for your rally points on save and loads and for disconnects. If you leave for 10 minutes, come back 10 minutes later, and now all your rally points are gone. Nobody wants that. So it's one of those things where we can't implement it or test it until the point when we get to actually cooking a build. We're working within that ecosystem of having the presence set up for the Epic backend, and then we can alliterate and tweak. So just keep in mind, there's a very high probability that if you leave a game in progress in the first couple of builds, we do get to that point in the foreseeable future in the next couple of weeks, your rally points are going to be reset until probably a couple of days to a week of us researching, learning the back end, and then figuring out the best way of saving those unique identifiers for disconnects and reconnects. You'll also notice that it doesn't have the rotate system. Oh, wait. He fixed the orientation. Yes, good shit. So it does have it. So in Legacy, it would rotate the flag towards your camera on the local. So that way you would always be able to see, like, it just was easy. If you rotate the camera, you're fucked. But the idea is that at the very least, it would at least try and face the flag towards you. So that way you would know, like, hey, like, that's my rally point. And then you can see an example of right screen, proper scaling, left screen, bad scaling. Bad scaling's my fault. I was debugging last night. And that's the general gist. This system is supported by every structure from a modding standpoint, but obviously it's only ever used and set and configured for structures that have shops, basically. There's some optimization and some tweaks we need to do from a back-end standpoint to potentially make it to where the rally point mesh doesn't even spawn if you're like a tent or like a command, like, something that doesn't build units. So we have to kind of go in there and clean that up and make it to where this doesn't spawn. And then that's the box selection mesh, so that doesn't count. It's local, and it only ever appears for clients, and it's really cheap. And then you have the AoE static mesh, which is basically that little yellow effect. And then you have the ambient AoE, which is something else that we were working on that we were porting over from Legacy. That was the cheap light system we had, so that way at nighttime you could see. So that way, like, those lights that would turn on from your barracks or your CIRK tent, we were working on that this week, but we need to take the weather system a little bit further, because what it basically did was it amplified the light that was already there. And it was a cheap way of adding fake lighting into the world that was really dirt cheap. Like, you could have thousands of these in the map, and there was no cost to it, as long as you didn't have too many overlapping of them. It was a static mesh trick with the material. So it's one of those things where it amplifies light in the scene, so we have to get the moon back in. And once we get the moon back in, then that way we can have it to where the buildings light up again. The barracks and the CIRK tent and the motor pool, they have their own ambient AoE lights that come back online. So it's one of those things where, like, we're working on that as well. And that's going to bleed into next week. I was getting it so that way your bases aren't like pitch dark when it comes to like their ambient AoE lighting that they had going on. Because we have the spotlights and we have the 360s, but those get expensive at scale. So you still have to basically do some kind of workaround and some kind of mitigation of the cost of having like an RTS of this scale is using like little fake visual tweaks where it's like you guys didn't even know that in Legacy Cepheus, those lights on your barracks aren't lights. They're static meshes with a special material that amplify light. It's a visual trick. It's a wizardry from Dimitri's side. So it's one of those things where we need to basically re-implement that, get the moonlight back in going into next week, and then get the weather system online and get that parity going. Because Dimitri wants to make some improvements to how we do the weather system. And having the visuals be on Niagara instead of Cascade and more visually pretty, whatever. So that's something else we'll be working on with the moon, with the weather system, is getting those in there. Because, like it or not, that's part of the playtest. Is you guys can't see at nighttime, you're kind of fucked. So we need to get that system in so you guys can even play a build at nighttime and not be like, what is going on? Where am I? Where are the infected kind of deal? If anyone has any opinions or ideas they want to drop in for the emergency lighting system, please save those to the end. And then we got the Minimap. We did the. Oh, right. With Durvar asked a million years ago. I'm so sorry. So a million years ago, I'm going to show it in single player and then I'll show it in multiplayer so people just like believe me, bro. So if I go to the landscapeable mode, hopefully Derek didn't break anything because this is something else that we were working on until the 11th hour. I was working on it and then I passed it off to him when I went to bed. So there's a possibility there's going to be dragons. If I press L, you get the landscaping tool. And essentially, if I clear that, then it updates the navigation. So if I go to show navigation, groovy. Now a unit would walk through there as if there was nothing there to begin with. And we got the old legacy landscaping system back in from vanilla, legacy, whatever. So you can see those little boxes represent where they can and cannot go. So if I clear that, boom. Okay, cool. Now I can go to there. Clear that one, great. Now I can go to there. Now there's a next step. The next aspect of it was making it to where if you place down a structure, and this was the part that was kicking our ass last night, is that you figure like, you can see the hover effect is going on there. Dimitri was saying it was brighter than that on his screen because the hover effect that you see there is too subdued. I'm going to have to send him this video clip later after the podcast because I can't see that. It needs to be that cyan border needs to be 3 times its thickness so people can actually see it. But the idea is that like if I do this, boom, both of them are gone, just like in Legacy. Do that, boom, that one's gone. Cool. We did a very robust, very dynamic, replicated system for that. So that if I go over and I switch to multiplayer, I'm going to pray that nothing broke. because there was a lot of code that came in last night. So we're going to see what happens. It's going to be interesting. So first we're going to try the first method and see if anything's broken. So we're going to do that. We're going to press L. Cool. We're going to try it on the client. Cool. Works. Now we're going to try building a generator. Cool. Works. Okay, we're groovy. Now we're going to check the master client. Okay, navigation updated. We're good. So nothing broke last night. So the idea is that way we got the landscaping system back in from what it was before. It supports walls. It supports everything you can build. The cost system's back in online. We made a very modular, easy way of doing it. BP landscapable. You can set the removal cost here. You just map a static mesh. Boom, Bob's your uncle. You're done. So you can add cars and trees and whatever you want to add to the system in the matter of like minutes. 5 seconds, really. I mean, I could just duplicate this object and then go and find, I'm going to make this porta potty removal. And then make sure it's aligned. Build the navigation for the base asset and level that's preset. Let me turn off multiplayer so I don't have to sit there and hunt down the ghost. And then if I press L, great. It's gone now. Navigation, cool. That's weird. Oh, I know why. So you have to set it as a dynamic entity in its content browser on a per case basis so that it registers on a special channel. So when you remove it, why is it being stupid? Oh, I'm pressing K because I'm stupid. That's weird. Okay, so there's something wrong with that abject's collision. Okay, I'll have to look into that. That is weird. Okay, well, there's a bug there, so I'll have to look into that. But that's something that I got to look into going into the week is figure out why that didn't work. Or is it because...
Yes, that is a fully rendered dunny. He has spawned in a fully rendered dunny.
It did remove, but it's like the navigation is not updating. So I have to figure out why that is and why that only happens for, I wonder. So if I create you, and then I go here, and then I go here, and I map that in there, then I compile it, and I'm going to drag you in there. We're going to build. I'm going to do it again. What the fuck? Okay, that's going to be fun. I have to look into that now because it only happens when it's a pre-authored asset for some reason. So something's being baked or created or set on the back end that basically makes it to where it only ever does it if you create a prefab of that actor, which is not the end of the world. I mean, there's worse things, but it's a little bit annoying because the design goal of the system was to have it to where you could add new objects, types, without having a prefab for every variation. So I'm going to have to look into that and figure out what the hell is going on. Fun. Well, it is what it is. Roll with the punches. So there's that. Let me move on to the next thing. I showed that already involuntarily. Showed that.
Did you?
Oh, I mean, it's so trivial, but it's whatever. It's like you figure... if anyone didn't notice, the cursor now animates and it does all that. And it, that was just the cursor, but, that. Okay, cool. So let me go into...
Have you shown off the rally
I'm
point?
going to show... Oh, I deleted him. Hold on. We're going to go here. We're going to grab the player. We're going to spawn in. We're going to possess him. There you are. And you'll notice that they get a special little mini map, basically. Huh. Or maybe they don't. Okay, so I guess the mini map, that's broken now. I'm just going to show the video. So if it was working nicely, it should be doing this. I guess there's something that Derek did in his test that's not showing on mine. But we mirrored a division and, division really, and basically just set up a basic mini-map system where when you possess the operator, it gives you a custom minimap that's zoomed in, that rotates with the player's orientation. Its frame rate needs to be increased to 30 frames per second, so then that way it's not as jittery. But it's something that we're looking into. Let me just do forever. So that way it just loops. And that's weird. Maybe I did something wrong. So if I possess little Timmy here, yeah, it just doesn't zoom or rotate. So it might have been something he changed and then it broke something else. This was all, we were working on all this literally to the 11th hour. So very likely something broke and we're going to have to look into that going into Monday. Okay, fun. Hold on. Show that. Oh. Wait, that's pretty much everything. We're going to have to move into the AMA, but one other thing I was going to show, just so people can see that it's working, is that, let me go over to the landscapables and build a wall. There you go. It works. I just wanted to show it because we had a GIF that we showed on Discord, so I try to just go through the list of everything that we've shown and then just add to it. So that's working. I'm going to test it and see if it's a replication issue. No, it's not a replication issue. So it's a registration issue. If I had to guess, it's not registering at all with the game state. Save it. Yeah, okay, fine. Well, I have the footage here, so I can send that off and we can look into that. Okay. Let's see if we have anything else before we move on to questions. Anything else you want to cover, Derivar, from questions or things you want to hit upon that I showed?
Honestly, I think the biggest thing that I can realistically say about it is the fact that it is good to see so much work already done, because it really puts light on how much hard work you guys are actually putting into it. Yeah. Like, I think realistically that's all I can really say about it. I don't really have many questions about replication, because you kind of covered everything. You sort of answered all of the questions that I was going to ask as you were going.
I just wanted to see if you wanted to add anything, because you figure I just know that I tend to talk overly technical at times. So it's like, I'm pretty sure some people tune me out sometimes. They're like, what the fuck is he talking about? I'm just like, I'm sorry.
I think the biggest thing is you have done really well today, at least, covering everything and explaining it in enough detail that overall everything was very well thought out, very well explained, and yeah, I managed to follow through really well, and
I dig it. And then one of the things was making it to where, like, I didn't really get to show this previously, but if I go to slow-mo 10, then they go out after that 60-second clock, and then your power is out. Like, like your EMS lights, all your base lights, all your barracks lights are now off, and you're in pitch darkness. And we're going to be having someone record some dialogue of, like, when it first starts, 10, and then 20 seconds, and then at 40 seconds, and then finally at 60 seconds, that the reserve power is offline, and that your base is going to be in darkness. That way, it kind of is like a feedback loop, visually and audio-wise, of like, hey, maybe you should deal with this kind of deal, because an infected might have done it, a civilian might have done it, or you just made a mistake of how you were building something. So it's something we wanted to play with and see how people receive it and how they like it. So I'm very curious how this is going to be received when it actually comes to the point of playtesting it and getting feedback from it. So that pretty much concludes the section about... Oh, Michael just snuck in. Did you want to talk about your weapons, Michael?
I'm currently driving, but I did have a question for you.
In the podcast?
What were some of the things? Well, it was more so just like, what were some of the things that you're really wanting to hit upon for next week?
Podcast
that you weren't able to fit in.
We'll come back to that. So what Michael's been basically working on is the weapons and getting them textured, getting them finalized, doing the final modeling for some of the assets. Because some of the assets were made a long time ago, and they had different standards at the time, different texture types we could put in there. We didn't know as much about the engine as we know now. So one of the things was basically just kind of going through and just getting like the Vector and the Scorpion Evo and the P90 remodeled, reanimated, retextured. And that's been kind of his thing of going through and just auditing them and getting them all situated. So there's that from Michael's standpoint. And then Efren's out this week. He'll be back next week. I think he went camping with his girlfriend. His girlfriend kidnapped him. So he'll be back next week, and then we'll be showing more. I think he's back technically tomorrow. And then basically he'll be resuming with his stuff. And then ideally, Dimitri will join him when we're done. When Dimitri's done helping us. Because realistically, he's the only technical artist that understands the level of sophistication of the stuff that we're doing right now. So I can't put him back, or I can't put him on the block out helping Efren until he finishes with the programming stuff that we need to get our job done, like the day and night system, like the weather system, like the turrets. When those systems are done and approved and there's nothing else on the structures that's acting weird, then at that point he'll go over and join Efren on finishing up Alcatraz, which I'll briefly show before we move into the Q&A so you guys can see the state that it's in. Nothing that much has changed, but not everyone here comes every single podcast, so I'll just briefly show it. So this is basically the state of Alcatraz as it stands right now. And I'll just run through it super duper fast, and then we're going to go into Q&A. So you can see there's no mini-map that was made for this. I got to get on him for finishing the collision here, because this is area, I think it's been like that for following through for weeks. Like he's been focusing so much on the modeling that he hasn't gone in and generated his UCX collision in some of these areas. So it's very easy to fall through on that area, and then it screws up whenever I'm showing you guys. So I'm putting it in slow-mo for the sake of time, so you can basically see like everything. And then let me scroll up here. Again, if you were here a week ago, then it hasn't changed that much, but I just wanted to show it for the people that haven't seen Alcatraz, is that this is going to be basically your hub or your main menu map. And it'll also serve a purpose in the confines of a new pandemic map, is that there will be a stripped down empty version of this map that you can build your CIRK bases on and dock the aircraft carrier at. That just doesn't have any civilians on it, but it's a last refuge / like fully military base for you to operate out of. So that in a nutshell is Alcatraz and where its current stage is in terms of development. We'll have another show next week in terms of basically Efren will be getting caught up and started back up on Monday. And then from there, I'll have a solid week to show more progress going into the next podcast. All right, so now we're going to move into the Q&A. Is there anything you want to add, Michael, for weapon modeling? Or maybe he's still driving. Okay, so we're going to move in. Yeah?
I think one of the biggest things that for Alcatraz that I'm sort of, I guess you could say excited about. I think one of the biggest things for Alcatraz is the ability to walk around and see it as the operator, and with all the CIRK structures and everything.
Yeah, that's going to come in slowly but surely as he works to kind of block it out. Because right now he has the skeleton in of what it looks like in real life, and now he needs the guy to kind of go in and do a little more like some detail, add in some CIRK unique objects, and just keep pushing it. Okay, so let's open it up for questions. There's a question on YouTube, and it's pertaining to the cone and camera direction for the players. So when it comes to the asset that you see in the minimap right now, that is a placeholder, or a blockout rather. We need to requisition the asset from the concept artists in the next week or so. And we'll be mirroring something like what Halo Wars does, where it basically has like some kind of like visualization of the direction and the location in its design. So you can clearly see what direction someone's facing. And it's not just, oh, I think it's kind of the way this object is oriented or rotated. So that's one of the things that we're going to seek to implement and just kind of sneak in over the next couple of weeks of podcasts. So yeah, that is something where like that little star chevron that you have there is a placeholder. And it's just meant so that the programmer could go in there and implement it and do his job and then pass it off to a concept artist for like a week or so. Let's see, what other questions do we have?
Now, I know someone's got their hand up on Discord.
Oh, bring them up.
I haven't been on one of these in a while. I was
hi,
about
what's
the
up?
minigun a while back. So feel free to kick me off.
Oh, Lord.
These. I have 5 questions, 3 of which are related to what you guys are talking about.
Okay.
2 of which are more general. So yeah, first off, with the rally support system, I joined kind of late, so I don't know if you covered this. So to my understanding, it allows you to bring in reinforcements or whatever, linked to a unique user ID. Will that extend to modded stuff, like say a modded client or modded servers? If they connect to a modded server, will the system support those summoning of those units?
We haven't gotten the modding yet, so I can't answer that question. That would be a design goal when we get to that point. The system is more UID for like the player themselves and not the unit itself. We don't limit it. Like we're not adding any kind of associating logic that's going to be like, oh, only save the unit ID for the rally point for this one unique unit. It's going to be like global reaching. So yeah, on the structure itself, it stores an identifier to the player's rally points. And then from there, the server authenticates it and is like, oh, this player built this unit. I'm going to use his rally point location. And then, so.
Oh,
okay. You're fine. You're fine. What's your next
severely.
question?
That's my bad. So the lighting fixes. You mentioned like you want the players to be able to see and stuff. Will this see the return of like I knew early versions had a thermal camera or whatever they could toggle to? Will that sort of thing be re-implemented, or is this or are you moving away from that to more of a natural lighting sort of thing, where the player has to rely on
the natural
what they can see in the battlefield?
What you can see. We need to reinstitute the night vision. When it came to the thermal, I know that it was a fan favorite. People loved it. But the problem is it broke the game in terms of you could lift the skirt up and you could see what was going on the other side of the map, and it made performance impossible, optimization impossible, because then we couldn't. Sure.
May I have a suggestion? What if the thermal camera, like normally it's a night vision camera, but in zones that are like within your where it's normally lit up or within your zone of control, it switches to thermal, so you can see everything within a zone you control. But outside of that, it's a fog of war.
Because you figure the tugs does the thermal in a very minimalistic way, where basically it scans and it reveals units via like a hologram effect, like in Last of Us. Technically, we were talking about having a structure that would scan or reveal units that was going to be kind of like a thermal in a radio region area, but we need to. I don't have an answer on that yet. I need to think about that because you figure out we already have a lot on our plate right now. So like to say I don't have anything on thermal right now. It's just more of like a wish list. I got to see what we can do at that point. But I do hear you on that. What's the next question?
The next question is, you mentioned changes to the landscaping system. That actually brought up a thought I had. So with future implementation of NPC factions, will they also be able to landscape the environments they control? Like say, if they want to place a structure here, they could
They're supposed to be able to do that
dumpsters or whatever.
They do that already. They should be, as far as I know. Yeah, you're good on that. Yeah, you're fine. You're fine. No one never. The thing is that you never actually see a dynamic civilian group do that, so you never like know. But they do the same thing you can do. What was your next one?
This one's kind of niche, but you know how there's a lot of like decorative structures and stuff you can place down if you want to be really meticulous? I was wondering, is there plans to give them like a functional use, sort of like maybe a morale system where soldiers feel happier if there's more decorative stuff around, or maybe civilians are more attracted to your place, kind of like they are with signs if there's more decoration? It's just, I don't know, it kind of struck me as odd, like the grand RTS thing we're kind of going for here, how much decoration there is. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just wondering if there's like plans, or at least maybe a design goal to integrate that into a more functional.
That's pretty much the reason
you know,
why I haven't
system.
added anymore. Was that Terminal and a couple other people have a master thread on the Discord, and they were like wanting me to add like another 2 or 3 dozen. And it's one of those things where I don't want to add those until they have more purpose in gameplay, or and then the infected have a better ability of prioritizing and attacking them and determining what they need to do to get to you. Because you can build those and it'll confuse the AI and they won't know how to get to you in some cases if you build too many of them. So it's one of those things where it's like I'm kind of holding out on that until we had the time and the resources to extend on it. Or it's like they had like a radio tower and they had like cargo crates and like cargo containers and a bunch of like doors and all that stuff. And it's like, those are nice to have, but they're not mission critical right now, to the point where I can do what you're saying, where if they're going, I mean, fine, there'll be some things that they want that are decorative that I'll concede on and put in, but some of them they have a little more purpose to their gameplay. And I need to like relook at that and see what we can do. So as it stands right now, the items that are in there right now are more of a compromise to give people that do want to decorate and design their bases something to work with. And anything further is going to be held off until I can do what you're saying. Anything else?
Okay, that's good to know. My final question is, it pertains, a while back, I remember asking you this, why we can't place floodlights that overlap, and you said basically it makes things infinitely more laggy. Will the changes to lighting be able to, solve that, so it won't, like, overlapping light sources
we
won't
fixed
make
that.
the game
That's a
kill
legacy,
itself?
and we're carrying on over to this one.
Oh,
you're fine. I'm assuming you haven't played the
that's
game
my
in a
bad.
long time.
Again, I haven't. It's been about 3
no,
months.
you're fine, because we figured we fixed that and we put it into experimental. As far as I know, it's on the normal build as well, and that there are no light build restrictions anymore. You're fine.
Okay, then that's my bad.
Okay. No worries.
Thank you for all the questions.
All right, what
That's
other
all.
questions do we have on YouTube or Discord?
So Air Tanker asked, also for walls, is it possible to, instead of building walls and with fences, is it to build a solid wall with a platform on the other side for soldiers to climb on and fire down?
I think he's
You're
talking
talking like
battlements,
the
yeah, those little battlement things.
troopers.
That's the tier
Starship
for
troopers.
walls. Those are on a wish list right now for the Doctrines CIRK thing. If I can squeeze them in during this next phase 2, then I will. Otherwise, like, that's purely just going to be a wish list item for right now, for everything else that's going on. But it is something that we're looking at long term. What else do we have? What else do we have for questions?
Marauder's got, sorry for being late. I would like to know if you guys have a date for the next update and also a date about the campaign.
That's fine.
Their English isn't so.
Look at the calendar. That said it's about a week because of COVID. Campaign's not going to be until next year at this point, based off of as it stands right now. Well, our goal is to try and get everything done ideally by the summer sale for Steam, and then until June for stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. So we're ready to haul ass and get all that situated, and then once that's said and done, everyone will basically take probably a couple weeks to a month where I'm going to like break their fingers if they work on game design, because everyone needs like a good solid couple weeks for a month vacation after all of this. And so that would mean that I would say that after that month after release co-op going into June, July, a couple weeks of support, then that month break for everyone. And then at that point, we'd start the campaign. The campaign will probably take us foreseeably about 6 to 8 months. That's 2026 at that point for the campaign. When it comes to the next build for you guys for a playtest on like we got to play test it first. We got to get ourselves to build, and then we got to get you guys to build a couple of days to a couple of weeks after. We're gonna try and aim. That's the hard part. Because it's going to be a soft deadline. It's going to be somewhere between the 19th to 26th, if I had to guess. But that build is going to be what I showed you, where it's going to be the horde map. And it's going to be just you spawn in and you play. And you can kind of just track and see how developed it is. Because I would wager we need at least another week or two. Because I was sick and I was KIA for a full week and a half because of COVID a week or two ago. So that put us back about a week or two, roughly. So you figure, yeah, I would say around the 19th to 26th is roughly what we're going to be aiming for to try and get a build out. I mean, as you guys can see, we're close, but we need the time to fix the bugs that you guys saw. We need to be able to play test it ourselves. We need to get the remaining aspects, and like the landscapeable being in, that's a huge element of like what was remaining. The last things that are going to kick our asses are going to, and the bugs not so much, maybe a day, a couple days. The AI is a couple of days, 1 to 2 days. It's going to be the ability system. It's going to be finishing the Minimap system. And then it's going to be, oh God, what was the other thing on the list? It was, I think it's really just the ability system that's going to kick our asses. Oh, technically, realistically, what's like the major line items that we have to do before we have a build is patrol, attack, move, the ability system, finish up the remaining for the Minimap, and then do probably a couple of hours to a day of bug fixing for the operator, for spawning, possessing, and giving the players an access or a way for being able to respawn as them, and making sure the respawning logic is working in an actual play session. So like those are the things that we're working on the next couple of weeks. The weather systems, like I mentioned, so you guys can see what's going on at nighttime. So you figure like, so yeah, I'll just do a recap. So it's the ability system, it's the Minimap, it's the Minimap with the ping system, with the tactical map, with the layers on the map, weather system, patrol, attack, move, possessing and spawning in operators. And then at that point, for the ability system, it's just going in and adding in the preliminary abilities that we have for the units that are like the assault, the engineer, adding in the medic, adding in the sniper, putting in his abilities, putting in the medic's abilities. So like you figure that's about a week or two, give or take. We could just, like I've said the argument before, I could cook a build right now. It's just there's not much to play. You guys would have like maybe 5 or 10 minutes something to do, like when I show these little streams, and then that'd be it. So the biggest thing is that like we need to keep pushing and showing these updates to the point where we reach critical mass for the end of phase 1. So whatever we do give you is more than just a vertical slice, isolated elements that you're just playing and looking at, and there's no real consequences. There's no real like depth to anything. You can't actually do anything because we need the time to do the mechanics and the systems. We need the time to actually package it in a form that you can play. You know, an end user can play. Because it's one thing for us to go into these maps and show you. It's another thing for you guys to play them. Because you figure, like, you guys aren't going to know the console commands. You guys aren't going to know how things work. So we need to make it from a UX standpoint where you guys can pick it up and play it and just see it. So just keep in mind, those are the things that are going into our mindset, like what we're thinking of when we're like, okay, let's put a build out. Because initially I had the idea of like, well, fuck it, we'll just put out like 3 or 4 maps, so you can't do that much, and you just move the camera around this one, and you spawn a key in the infected spawn here, and then you can build in this map, and you have zones, and I'm like, that's really boring. Like, what the fuck? They can just see that in the podcast. I don't think it's worth the time and the effort to get that over versus just finishing what we're doing right now, and then getting in your hands like that horde map, but it's fully playable and working. So that's what we're working towards when it comes down to it. What other questions do we have?
Sure. Someone's actually got a law question for Chris. Are the CIRK engineers forklift certified?
They are.
They are. Very good.
What else do we have?
All right, so someone asked if there was going to be cannon fodder troops that we can use to hold small zones that are cheap. I think me and everyone else agrees.
Groups, that's why you recruit them. What else do we have?
I think that's it on Discord. Anyone else got their hand up? No.
We'll give it another couple minutes. If there's no questions, we'll wrap it at that point. So we'll give it another 2 or 3 minutes. Naval support units, not this time. There's no plans for having naval support units at this time. Yeah, the most we're going to go for that is the LCAC and the aircraft carrier and the weapon armament that they have loaded with. And anything beyond that will be basically something that we're going to look into in the foreseeable future. Maybe. It's one of those things where, like, right now we have quite a bit already to implement on the doctrines and the CIRK sheet that I don't want to add anything else at this time until we're caught up and we have the everything back out again for like the rebuild. I think Dumb Brick was about to write a question. I'm watching Discord. I mean, not Discord, it's Steam. There's nothing there, so if there's no questions in the next couple minutes, we'll wrap it at that point. So, Michael, how are you doing? Is he there? Or is he muted? Oh.
He's muted himself. So, I don't know. What do we want to talk about? Movies?
I think I'm muted. Oh yeah.
Sorry,
okay,
I'm dying.
Mind.
What's
Sorry,
up?
He's not off his day job. Never mind. Why'd you join then? What the fuck?
Because I get spammed with you've been invited to the stage, so it's just like.
Never was it you? Oh, that's
I saw his hand up, so I fucking invited him.
Oh,
that was the guy beside me.
You deaf for it, you dick.
No, your hand up. Wait, I saw your hand up.
Likely story. No, I'm good though.
Never mind then. I was gonna have you talk about weapons to fill the air. Chris, you want to talk about something? I believe in you. Oh Lord.
Talk about weapons.
Okay.
Wait. Someone has their hand up. I'm on the phone though, so I don't know how to do
We'll do one more question and then we'll wrap it at that point. What's that, Cloud?
Okay. I have the game running right now. Will there be canine units? Like maybe as cheap infection detectors or, I don't know, some fast scout unit type thing on the ground?
What?
I think we talked about the engineer pet.
We cut that early off because we cut that. What did we cut that for? Do you remember, Chris?
Yeah, that was ages ago. Because I've been wanting a dog for a long time, and then we were gonna do the robot mule guy.
I kill dogs.
You keep killing the dogs off.
I think it's a wish list item because it's really complicated, like from an animation side and then from a technical side, and it's kind of one of those things that we might revisit when we have a lot more resource time to kind of like throw into that. I feel like, especially with how things are right now, we need to really focus on the core and maybe come back to that kind of like the wall things with the unit shooting over them and stuff.
Yeah, it'll be a $20 deal.
Speaking of engineers, so assuming I haven't missed something and the anarchist faction hasn't been cut or whatever, will they potentially plant landmines or IEDs or other types of things that only your engineers could detect and clear out?
Honestly, we haven't discussed that because that's been saved for 1.4. Their group got rebranded from the anarchists to more militants. Is right, Chris? Survivalist is
survivalist. Well, there is the anarchists because they're NPC faction, like they're not.
Yeah,
like,
so there is that still that raider group, but it's one of those things where when it comes to them, her whole thing is cloak and dagger and subterfuge and stealth and ambushing. So yes, along that tread, when we get to that point of fleshing them out in 1.4, that's something we're ultimately going to look at, because my idea was suicide bombers. My idea was using civilians as cannon fodder for being able to hide in them, basically. Because there are no rules. They're like kind of like they're just trying to win at all costs. So that is something that we're going to look into, and that is being saved for 1.4. 1.4.
This is
You're horrible.
why not dog suicide bombers? That's an actual thing.
Oh,
Jesus
God.
Christ. I know I like to put the dog ideas out, but
no.
what the fuck? Yeah.
Okay, can I just say something? Rob, you probably need to re-clarify a little bit about the whole dog situation, because the last soundbite we have of you saying that you were sort of denying
the
dogs was
fuck?
I kill dogs. That's probably not the best
I
soundbite.
killed
and now
down
with
the
this idea,
idea
you can live up
of
to that.
implementing dogs into the game, and then Michael cries in the corner. No, actually, I was actually petting her and scratching her back when I was saying that. She's literally on the couch rolling over, and I'm scratching my dog's belly right now. She's like, "You fucking whore." She's like, "Why would you say that?" So,
But yeah, they tried to train dogs to walk under tanks and blow up. I feel like that's sort of thing to be used against CIRK.
like we figured, like, okay, so we were gonna go down the line of the anarchists or the militants or the whatever, the survivalists. The idea is that they were just gonna be like the GLA. So I wanted to base them around that archetype and then expand on it. And I wanted to make Pierce like the British from like Company Heroes 1, where they're more mobile. So like I wanted to kind of like have a different like take on each one. So different play styles were accompanying each like tactic, or get different tactics to fight them. And that's something where it's like, at that point, that's something towards like the end of the year, going into next year, where we'd basically like shift our resources to the campaign. But at the same time, those extra resources from the co-op coming out would go towards building up those two factions to be they're bigger than the civilian groups. Because the dynamic civilian groups are a stepping stone, where it's like, that's the idea we want to do with every low-level basic civilians. We want to incorporate some elements from like Pierce and Natalie, like management, orders, missions. But at the same time, we want to like add the more sophistication to the AI and the more like high-level like executions of like what we're talking about of like subterfuge and planning. And save that for like Pierce and Natalie, because they're the major factions, and dynamic civilian groups are more of like the ragtag, smaller groups that are more like subservient, or like they serve Pierce and Natalie as like vassals per se. So that was kind of the idea we were going in when it comes down to it. It could change based off of playtesting and just what feels right, because it's one thing to write something down. It's another thing to implement it and playtest it. And then you're like, oh, wait, this doesn't work because it doesn't feel right, blah, blah, blah. That's game design. So it's one of those things where it's like, we'll have to wait and see how it goes. But I don't know about the dog idea.
Yeah, I'm so
we'll
sorry.
see. No, it's okay. It injects some fun to the conversation, because like you figure these are fun. We're having a conversation. We're talking about stuff. There's some back and forth. Lord.
Yeah, why don't we do?
I still can't believe that after I suggested that the you guys using an assault ship instead of an aircraft carrier, I look at the game 6 months later and
because like again, like the role changed, and like you brought it up at just the right time, because you brought it up in one of the podcasts, and then I was like, well, Dimitri, we need to support this and that. These aspects of design has changed. Like we were saying, well, why don't we go with the smaller variant? And then we came across the LHA6. And we were like, okay, well, let's go with that one, because you figure it fit all the roles we needed. It was compact enough to where we could dock it, and it didn't look absurd. And it worked out. Oh yeah.
All I'm gonna say is I told you so.
I cry every time. But yeah, that's what I mean though, where it's kind of like the constant back and forth of tweaking and manipulating and just kind of hearing what people have to say, because that's how civilian evacuations got added. That's how the aircraft carrier change happened. The power change, everything just kind of comes off of us just sitting down and talking to people generally and just getting ideas.
I think Dumb Brick has probably had maybe the worst suggestion. Not the worst. No, Suicide Dogs was definitely bad.
Suicide bird missiles?
Yeah, suicide bird missiles. The US,
the bats.
I think
they wanted to put incendiary grenades on bats and fly them over Japan.
No.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
pigeons?
they also use pigeons.
They use pigeons.
There's a recent video that I watched on
Yeah.
YouTube about he just released about bird bombs.
Okay.
Yeah. They trained pigeons.
So this
to
podcast has
shit.
devolved into using animals
You
as
see what
live
you've done?
explosives.
You said
Hey,
you've
a
done
They
you've
food or a
created
bomb, one of the
monsters.
I take no blame in this. I have no blame in this.
Lord.
I will be contacting my lawyer.
Cepheus. Please the fifth and
Please
deedly.
the fifth.
But yes, you're good. You're good.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. So then I think we'll take another question off of YouTube. Let's see if I think on YouTube. Okay. So 71445 asked
not
the question.
on the
Well, we'll
ground.
take his and then we'll conclude at that point. Do you guys have plans about adding a side mission system to the pandemic mode, like receiving a mission from civilians to evacuate them from an infected area within a given time with money as reward? So that is effectively something that we're looking into going into 1.4 of having like a dynamic mission system or some kind of way of like littering the map with like scenarios. Like Far Cry calls it like 10 second, 15 second mission, like moments for like a bird will like, like, or like a tiger will attack you and then it turns into like a little mini mission. But myself and Chris have like a short list that we've written up where it's basically just kind of like a plane crash, or they get to extract a VIP, or it would be like, or some of them would just be non-committal ones where it's like a pack of dogs attacks you, or a raider, basically attacks you with like another group. Like these are like not attached to anything as a whole in terms of a group, and they're basically just small little mini scenarios and missions that can occur that sometimes give you a reward, but sometimes your reward is not dying. Where it's basically just like you can choose to engage or leave or watch it play out is the idea. So that was something that we were talking about there, and that's earmarked for the future going into 1.4 on the campaign where it's like world events. It's what it's put as on the roadmap, website. Anything else we got from Discord?
So Democos asks, will you be adding more infected types?
Yeah, I would say 1.4 would be the lucky number for that, because you figure at that point we'll be able to benefit from getting all the base game rebuilt, and having the co-op out, and then at that point we'd be able to use those resources and reinvest them into getting the concepts that we have done for the infected situated. Because we figure right now the goal going for 1.3 is going to be taking the infected we have right now and stretching them further and making better utilization of them in terms of their AI and their intelligence. And then at that point, the next step, the logical step at that point will be from the escalation of adding all these new toys to CIRK in 1.3 is to do what you're talking about 1.4. Or we look into like adding, I think it's like 2 or 3 infected types that are just basically like off the top of my head that we're going to be adding, but there'll perceivably be more as we just kind of keep fleshing them out and build on them. Okay, anything else?
Silent Song on Discord asks, will those side missions be tied to your reputation, like not ask to be rescued by somebody who killed everyone?
At it stands right now, they're more basic and neutral ones, but that could change over time. The ones we're talking about are like more of like raiders, ones that are for the government, ones that are for like, it's raiders and for the government really is all the ones that we had on our dossier. Chris, do you remember anything else for those little side mission ideas we wrote up?
Well, it was minor civilian ones, like so-and-so needs to be moved from a
Okay,
house.
so we did have basically. Okay.
Yeah, news chopper crashed. Yeah, it was things that you can, like, if it's across the map and you're just not in the mood to go over there, you can let it go. And other ones you might just randomly come across as you're progressing through the game.
That makes sense. What else do we have for questions? Sorry.
Will you be having chicken jockey? No. I think that's it. Real. Any on YouTube or Steam?
No. Okay. So then we will conclude it there. I'll give the outro on that we made, and then yeah. So let me cue the outro. That's a wrap on this week's Cepheus Protocol HQ. I'm Robert, and thanks for hanging out and exploring the world we're building. Huge thanks to everyone supporting us on Patreon, YouTube, Discord, and beyond. Whether you're backing us, sharing feedback, or just being part of the ride, you make all of this possible. If you want to consider supporting us, check out the many ways of supporting development via Patreon, merch, official novels, and DLC on Steam. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week for another CIRK.